written with the influence of Harlem Renaissance, which started in America during 1920s. So Langston Hughes belongs to the school of Harlem Renaissance, and he was a famous Afro-American poet. Here we have a summary of the poem As I Grew Older. So we will see the summary in detail. Langston Hughes is a renowned Afro-American poet. He was a writer and a thinker of Harlem Renaissance. His well-known collections of poetry are The Very Blues and Fine Clothes of Jews. So he published two collection of poems. The first one is The Very Blues, and which fetched a good name, popular name to Langston Hughes. So with that collection of poetry, he never saw back, and he went on writing poetry, plays, novels, and stories. And our present poem, As I Grew Older, is also one of the poems that was included in the Very Blues. And his second famous collection of poetry is Free Clothes to Jews. And during all his career, Langston Hughes strongly condemned racism and celebrated Afro-American life and culture in his writings. He wrote of equality, and he was the early inventor of George poetry. So, Harlem Renaissance gave birth to George music and George poetry. So, musicians, African American musicians, started creating George music, in which there is no sequence or in the rhythm system. By influenced by this George music, some poets created George poetry. So among them, Langston Hughes is considered as one of the uh, poets who invented George poetry. Coming to the present poem, As I Grew Older, was first published in 1925, and this poem is a best representation for Afro-American voices. So in this poem, Langston Hughes presents how racism was present in his life, in Afro-Americans' lives, and how it to be criticized, condemned is presented in this poem. So this poem can be considered as the best Afro-American voices. The main theme of this poem is racial discrimination. So in this poem, Langston Hughes presents his theme, that is about racial discrimination, how racial discrimination is there, and how the poet wants to counter face this racial discrimination. He recorded his idea in the poem on racial discrimination he had faced as an Afro American. The poem shows the anguish of those who have been victims of racial discrimination. So, throughout this poem, the poet strongly presents his anguish, his anger, his disapproval towards racial discrimination. He expresses his ideas effectively through different images. So throughout the poem, the poet presents beautiful images that are present in the poem by explaining the wall. He presents a wall which touches the sky. So the image of wall represents the discrimination and the wall between two races that are present in American society. And he uses his black strong hands. So many beautiful images are presented in this poem. The poet talks about three frames of times. In this poem, he presents three types of time. In the past, he had a dream. So in the past, the poet used to have a dream. So in the beginning of the poem, he talks about his dream. That dream is about for equality, and it is as bright as the sun. So his dream is so bright as the sun. Now he has almost forgotten his dream. Then he a wall rose between the poet and his dream. Now, as time passes, the poet presents the present life and he forgets his dream, and almost all he forgets his dream. Then a wall which represents the racial discrimination between the poet and his dream. So the poet belongs to African American race, and his dream is about equality. It rose slowly and slowly until it reached the sky. So it reaches till it touches the sky. His dream was about the equality. So his dream is about is equality, and and equality among the people irrespective of race. So he expects equality among the people. The wall created shadow and the poet lied in the shadow. So in this way, the wall created a shadow, darkness, and now the people, the African Americans